Hi, this is Annie again, and this video for Fleur de Lis we're going to be doing the half Maltese cross. As you can see, this is my little 5-inch sample. These are block 7 and this is block 10, and they look very, very much alike. The only difference is there's this little pink arch with the little bubble quilting in it, and it's located in a different spot. So block 7 and 10, let me see if I can find them here in the quilt. Believe you'll find, I think that's 10 and that's 7, I think. But there's a quilt map, you might want to refer to that. This half Maltese cross is located in other places. For the block we're going to be doing, I'm going to show you the one that has the applique on it. There are others on here right next to it that does not have applique, just quilting. But I'm going to show you the one with applique just to give you a little taste of that. But again, these half Maltese cross are just kind of circling the main quilt. You will not find any of this in the border block, just in this area of the main quilt. So let's get to the machine and we'll begin sewing. Alright, so I have all my supplies here so that I can stitch out block 10. Block 10 is this block right here, and this is block 7, and they're basically the same block, but there's a piece of some of the quilting which goes on a little bit different direction on both blocks. So these are both half Maltese blocks, half Maltese cross blocks, and you'll also find that there's a few more of these in the main quilt. There's also blocks 8 and 14, 4 and 13, and this one here is 7 and 10. I have all my supplies here. I have my backing fabric, I have my wool, and I also have a couple pieces of fabric 6. I have some creams here that are almost the same color but very slight difference, so it's kind of difficult for you guys to see, and a couple pieces of block 5. And also a couple pieces for an applique fabric. And there's all my thread A, B, C, D, my thread E, which is my quilting thread, and also my water soluble and my embroidery bobbin thread. And these are all the supplies I'm going to need, and you can refer to your supply list to get the complete list and sizes of the piece you'll need based on the size block you're making. So let's get started at the machine. Okay, I'm stitching out block 10, and 7 is almost a mirror image of it, so it will be stitched out the same way. I have my embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin, and I have water soluble thread in the needle. And the first step is it's going to sew a placement stitch onto the battleizer that we have in the hoop. For step 2, we're going to add our wool batting. We still have our water soluble thread in the needle, and we're just going to place our wool batting right over that placement stitch, and we're going to sew a zigzag stitch to attach that to our battleizer, and it'll also sew a placement stitch for our fabric. You will want to have your presser foot in the highest position that your machine will allow, and that will help with the loft on the batting. We also have pressed the edges of our batting in about 1/4 minute so that it's flat. And that'll help keep the foot from getting caught in there while attaching it to the battleizer. And I just like to hold it in place as it's stitching, so it's lined up with the placement stitch. It's going to sew that placement stitch for the fabric, but I'm going to clip this thread, and that will help you keep that presser foot possibly getting stuck in that jump stitch. And if your presser foot is such that you can't raise the height of it, or it's not high enough, you can just use your finger to hold it down as it stitches. Just press it down before it gets to that spot. Okay, step 3, we're going to take our fabric 5 and we're going to place it right over this section of our batting, and I'm just going to peek underneath, make sure it's centered properly and that there's enough fabric flowing into the outside of the block, and enough so that there's about 1/4 of an inch left here at the top. And I think we're in a good spot right there. And now with water soluble thread, we're going to tack this fabric to our block. Okay, now we can trim some of that fabric that's inside the block to 1/4 of an inch seam. So this is a hoop scissors, which is a nice scissors for cutting your fabric that's inside the block. It has an offset handle, so if you haven't seen one of these, ask your dealer to order it for you. So I'll just trim that to 1/4 inch, scant 1/4 inch. Since this is we're sewing first and then cutting, we know that we're going to have everything in exactly the right spot. So let me change my thread and then we'll move on to step 4. So for step 4, I've changed my thread to a neutral thread in the needle, and this is my fabric 6. It's a little darker than my first piece of fabric, and I'm going to lay it right side down with the raw edges even, and I want to make sure that the corner up here extends about 1/4 of an inch past this placement stitch. And with the raw edges even and neutral thread, I'm going to sew my seam. And then for the next step, I'm going to flip my fabric so it's right side up, and this is step 5. I'm going to finger press it. I'm going to smooth it out, and then still with neutral thread, I'm going to sew a tack down stitch. And let me just cut a couple threads here. What we could do right here is we could trim this right now to a scant 1/4 inch or 1/4 inch, or we can do it after we get the next piece of fabric on. So I think that'll help us save some time. So for step 6, it's also my fabric 6, right sides down just like last time, leaving 1/4 of an inch up here with my raw edges even, and we can sew another seam. I have my thread cutter turned off, so I'm having to cut my threads all the time. Here you can have it turned on, but once you get your backing fabric on, you're going to want to have it turned off. But now step 7, we're going to flip our fabric, finger press it, and smooth it out. And step 7, we'll sew a tack down with our neutral thread. And so now it is time to trim our fabric to a scant 1/4 inch. And I'm going to leave the hoop in place. If it's a little difficult to get the angle of the cut, you can remove it from your hoop. Just make sure you place it on a firm, flat surface so that you don't put any pressure on this and possibly get it out of line or loosened up in the hoop or pop out completely. Step 8, we're going to add our fabric. Get the name of the fabric right. Step 8 is our fabric 5, which is our lighter color that we started with. and we're going to lay this right sides down, raw edges even with this piece. And again, we're going to make sure that we're about 1/4 of an inch, and you can kind of tell where the needle's coming down, that it's in the right spot. So then as long as you have your raw edges even, we can go ahead, we're sewing the seam with a neutral thread. And just like before, we're going to flip it, finger press it, smooth it out, and we're going to sew a tack down with the neutral thread. And this is step 9, by the way. And you can trim right now, or you can wait until you add the next piece of fabric, then you can trim all the way across. So I'm going to save a little time by trimming after I add the next piece of fabric. So step 10, we're going to take our fabric 5, our last piece, and we're going to lay it raw edges even, and making sure we have at least 1/4 of an inch up here. And when you get it in place, go ahead and stitch the seam. And step 11, we flip the fabric right side up, finger press, smooth it out, and sew a tack down stitch. Let me trim my fabric, and then we'll move on to step 12. Step 12, we have our fabric 6, and we're going to lay it right side down, raw edges even. You can see I just have this trimmed, and we're going to put the raw edges even. We're also going to check these corners. We're going to make sure we have equal amount of fabric at the top and at the bottom. And neutral thread, we're sewing a seam. Change to water soluble thread because our next step is going to be a tack down, but it's going to be on the edge of the block. And anytime we have stitching that we want on the edge of our block, if possible, we try to use water soluble thread. That way when you sew all your blocks together, you won't have any stitching possibly peeking out. So let me change my thread. So my water soluble thread is in the needle. I flipped my fabric up and finger pressed. I'm just going to hold it nice and secure, and we're going to go ahead and sew a tack down stitch at the top and over on the left hand side, and then it will also do a placement stitch. I'm going to cut this jump thread. Might be something you want to do as well. Sewing a placement stitch for our applique. Okay, we're ready for step 14. Step 14, we're going to take our fabric, I believe this is fabric 4, and let me cut a couple of these jump threads. And we are going to place our fabric 4 in the center section, so I'll place it right here. We're still using water soluble thread. I just peek underneath, make sure I'm fully covered, and now we can sew a tack down stitch for the center applique. Around it 2 times. It'll add security for when you go to trim. Alright, I'm going to bring it forward a little, and now we're going to trim the fabric real close to that stitching, because it's going to be applique. We have a couple things to do before we sew our satin stitches on the edge of that applique, and that is we're now going to be adding our fabric 3, and that would be the applique for around the rest of that flower. So I'm just going to place it over those placement stitches, and again I just want to check to make sure I'm fully covering it. I don't want to wind up too close and miss something. Okay. Now we can sew the tack down stitch and step 15 for this part of the applique flower. Stop and cut that little thread tail. And again, this will stitch around this area twice. And once it is done that, I will take the hoop off the machine because there's a lot of little angles and stuff in there. And I'll use my little HoopSisters mini to cut real close to the stitching. So I will be back after I get that trimmed. So I have my flower all trimmed up, and for step 16 I have thread D in the needle and embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin, and I'm going to sew the satin stitch around the center part of the flower. We'll be back when it's finished for the next step. Step 17 or 18 is going to be sewing some embroidery inside the center of the flower, and we're going to be using thread B and thread A, and so we won't be showing it, but we'll just show you after it is finished. So the center of the flower is complete. Step 19, we are going to put thread C in the needle, and we still have embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin, and it's going to sew the satin cover stitch around the edge of the entire flower. So for step 20, I have thread A in the needle and embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin. It's going to sew a little satin oval there at the base of the center of the flower. For the next step, it's step 21, is when we're going to add our backing fabric, and this is my backing fabric. And if you hoop your battleizer so that the rough side is towards the bottom, it's kind of hard to tell, you have to really compare, but the rougher side being on the bottom will help this stick better. The other thing you could use is maybe a little KK2000. It was also another good product you can use. There's others on the market too. And you're going to, over a trash can, you're going to spray the wrong side of your backing fabric. And then you'll carefully take the hoop off the machine, and you'll adhere this to the back of the hoop, making sure it's centered over the placement stitches. So I'll do that right now, and then I'll bring it back to the machine, and I'll have water soluble thread in the needle, and we'll attach the backing to the back of the hoop. So step 21, this is the back of my hoop. and I made sure that I had it centered over the placement stitch so that it's even on all four sides. I have a little KK2000 spray, temporary spray adhesive on there. I'm going to flip it over, I'm going to slide it in there, and then I like to peek underneath just to make sure it didn't flop over. We call that Dunlops in HoopSisterville. And I'll attach my hoop, another quick peek, water soluble thread in the needle, and it's going to do a basting stitch around the outside edge. The only thing you really need to do is just watch you're okay if the folds go down, but when it comes around here, these could possibly be flipped up, so as the needle comes over, you might want to just hold it down. So now our backing fabric is attached. So now we're onto the quilting part of our block, and it starts in step 22 after the backing is on. And anytime the backing fabric is on, you're going to want to make sure that you've turned your needle threader off. Mine was already turned off from the previous block, so I don't need to do that. But it's important to do that because it helps with a nice, cleaner looking back. The other thing to help the back look nicer is before you begin sewing, I'm going to do a needle down, needle up, and I'm going to pull the bobbin thread up to the top, and from here on out your bobbin thread is going to match your needle thread. So this is my thread E, and I have both to the top, and so now I can begin doing the quilting. And you might want to stay near your machine as it does this. There might be a couple of jump threads every once in a while to cut. Some of them are okay to leave in there and you can clean them up later. There are others that are a little longer that you might want to cut so that your presser foot doesn't get caught in it as it stitches. So I'm just going to stop and cut this little short one. I could have waited on that one, but just giving you the idea of what you can do. So this has quite a bit of quilting to do on here, and then there's one final step after this. So our final step, step 23, we're going to take our thread. We have thread C in the needle and in the bobbin. Remember, we're going to bring the bobbin thread to the top and all these quilting stitches. That way, everything will look nice on the back. After it takes a few stitches, I'm going to trim this thread tail so it doesn't get caught in the rest of that quilting. And this is it. This is the final quilting step. It's looking pretty good. Back. So we're going to flip it right side up, and with our trimmer by George, we're going to take our metal edge. This block will be trimmed on all four sides using the trimmer by George. So we will use that to trim everything away except for the fabric on the front. Make sure you take a peek to make sure there's no fabric peeking out. I can save this piece of batting for my next block. I got something, oh, little piece of plastic on my trimmer. Hey, you never know what's going to happen here. We're going to do all four sides, squeegee that up in there, make sure no fabric's peeking out, and remember you're going to need your 60mm rotary cutter because that metal edge raises the height of that ruler. It looks like I'm okay to cut. And our final side. Okay, so there's the back, but now we have to trim the fabric on the front. So with the ruler side of our trimmer by George, I'm going to place the 1/4 inch marking right on that basting stitch. and we're going to have a 1/4 inch seam left behind. We're going to do that on all 4 sides. And one more side. Okay, so there's that block on the front. And again, these are the half Maltese cross. I always forget the name of it, can never remember. But there'll be a few blocks that will be the same. I'm just going to show real quick here where they are. It'll be basically all these blocks that go around on the main quilt. These are all Maltese cross half square triangles. So there you have it. There's that block. See you next time.